This is the rivalry, Ben Roethlisberger. I think your season's on the line right here, Pittsburgh fans.
Here we go. 30th time between Tomlin and Harbaugh. What a decision this is. The game hinges on one play. Jackson flings it. Andrews can't get to it. Could not reel it in. Incomplete.
Oh, and it's 1 inch from Baltimore. Going to 9-3, but instead, the Steelers are alive.
Welcome back, everyone. It's David. There are just 6 weeks left of the NFL regular season, including this one, so everything means that much more. There are plenty of divisional games that had a playoff-type atmosphere and winter weather conditions, which serves as an excellent preview of what will be in store for come January. After Belichick reigns supreme again in the biggest game of the week, will that mean the most anticipated regular season game of all time is about to become the most anticipated Super Bowl of all time? It would be a fitting end to what's been a wild season. If you like what you see, be sure to hit that subscribe button and give us a follow on social media. Bengals-Chargers was the game that nobody wanted to win. There are plenty of fan bases that can claim to be cursed, but there are a few franchises that are as moribund historically as the Bengals and Chargers. Every time they seem to give their fans a slight glimmer of hope that things will be different, they find a way to let them down again. Case in point, even though the Bengals and Chargers have seemingly struck gold at the QB spot, their respective seasons have been more the same. Obviously, it's no fun for Bengals and Chargers fans to go through this every year, but that doesn't mean it isn't frustrating for neutral observers as well. Part of the excitement of sports is seeing a once mediocre team overcome their hurdles and finally get over the hump by winning a championship. But by seeing them go through the same patterns each and every year, how can they ever believe that things are going to change? This game in particular played out exactly like their seasons have. The Chargers managed to take advantage of the Chiefs' early season struggles and had people believing they could win their division. But in every big game this year, they failed to show up. And with the AFC North being as big of a toss-up as it is, the Bengals had some thinking they could do the thing when they blew out the Ravens in their barn. They've also been treated to transcendent play from their first-round selections in Rashawn Slater and Jamar Chase. The Chargers won this game because they've been slightly worse at imploding than the Bengals, but it wasn't for lack of trying. After racing out to a 24-0 lead, they almost let the Bengals come all the way back. Unfortunately, though, they ran out of gas and playing most of the game through injury eventually caught up to Burrow. That's why, considering a lot of the pregame buildup was centered around this being Burrow and Herbert's first ever head-to-head meeting, a lot of people wanted to make this a referendum on who's the better starting QB. But this wasn't the game for that. Fortunately, both the Bengals and Chargers are still in playoff spots after this week, and getting to the playoffs will be considered a successful season for either team. But now that they have their franchise QBs in place, it's clear that they're both in need of a culture change, since fan bases shouldn't have to put up with mediocrity like this. The Miami Dolphins have had a truly unique season. After they started out 1-7, and much of the talk centered around them was about blowing it up again, they've now won 5 straight and find themselves in the middle of a jammed playoff field. And the biggest reason for it has been their schedule, of course. After all, aside from the Ravens, none of these wins have come against good teams. That being said, a lot of folks left Tua Tagovailoa for dead, and so the Dolphins needed to move on from him. So he deserves credit too, for bouncing back from his early season struggles and doing enough to get by during these past 5 weeks. While he hasn't been amazing, he's been steady. But that's a compliment. He reminds me a lot of Jimmy G. They both faced a boatload of criticism, but they've been able to weather the storm and guide their teams on a winning run. Again, also a compliment, even though it doesn't seem like it. And this certainly wasn't a good week for Jimmy G. But after all, it wasn't that long ago that Jimmy led the 49ers on a deep playoff run. Who's to say that Tua is not capable of doing the same with the Dolphins? One thing's for certain, he's earned a shot at being the franchise QB. Of course, Tua's no stranger to adversity. He introduced himself to the world during his true freshman season by coming off the bench and completing a 20-point comeback in the national championship game of all stages. When it comes to young QBs, mental toughness is just as important as physical talent, and it's been very impressive to see the way Tua's handled himself this year. Not only has he been disrespected by fans and media, but by his peers as well. After the game, Logan Ryan said his QB skills are a lot like Tua's in that I can throw 2-yard passes too. Considering how much of a shit show the Giants have been all year, perhaps Ryan should be more concerned with how to improve his own team rather than taking shots at a QB he just lost to. It's highly unlikely that Tua was rattled by those comments though, because winning really does cure all. Because of the Dolphins' easy schedule down the stretch, they play the Jets, Saints, and Titans. They're suddenly a threat to snatch one of the final playoff berths. Although just like last year, it may come down to the final week against the Patriots. And considering how that went last year, that doesn't bode well for the Dolphins' playoff chances. Congrats to the Lions, who are much better than what their record tells you. It would be way too easy to pile on the Vikings and say they need to fold their franchise after losing to the winless Lions. But I want to say nice things about the Lions since no one has done that all year. Give credit where it's due. It's been a huge week for football in the state of Michigan. Between the Lions getting their first win of the season and Michigan becoming Big Ten champions and clinching a playoff spot, football has really brought the community together after the senseless act of violence in Oxford. Both the Wolverines and Lions dedicated their wins to victims of the shooting, with Michigan's tribute perhaps being the most poignant when they scored 42 points. 42 was the number that Tate Meyer, the football player that was killed in the Oxford shooting, wore. In what was an emotional weekend, both teams proved that some things are bigger than sports, and that was beautiful to see. As for the team's performance, the reason why the Lions are better than their record would indicate is because of how hard they've played, even in some losses. Many of their games have been very close, with the winner being decided on the last play. That's even how their first meeting with the Vikings was decided. Perhaps no game captured the Lions' hard luck more so than their one against the Ravens when they lost on Justin Tucker's 66-yard field goal. I mean, what the hell do you do about that? That's literally never happened before. Among others, they also tied the Steelers and nearly beat the Browns with their third stringer. So it was only fitting then that they finally got to experience what it was like to be on the other side of a last play win. Now make no mistake, just because I'm saying the Lions are better than their record, that doesn't mean they're not bad. They are very bad, and they deserve to be in the position they're in. Even in this one, they still made a number of boneheaded plays that made you wonder if they should try their luck in Division 1 instead. But are they as bad as previous one-win teams that we've seen? Not remotely. And while they should still find a way to move on from Jared Goff, all the talk of firing Dan Campbell is nonsense. He was dealt a shit hand and has still made this team competitive on most weeks, but he was finally rewarded for the fruits of his labor this week. The Ravens' decision to go for 2 will prove costly by the end of the season. In an AFC that's resembled the Wild West all year, the Ravens had a chance to stake their claim as the best team in the conference and blew it. Instead of a win that would have separated them from the rest of the pack, they find themselves in a logjam of 8-4 teams that are looking up at the Patriots. And with the Bengals only a game behind them, the AFC North isn't exactly settled yet either. While losing to the Steelers sucks, they shouldn't necessarily be docked points for it when it comes to sizing up the AFC contenders. Everyone knows that rivalry games like this are always intensified and records mean nothing heading into them. But despite the Pats' winning run, the case can be made for the Ravens as the AFC's best team. They've got a QB who's only 2 years out from winning an MVP and might actually be having a better season this year, while his receivers have impressed. Not just the known quantities like Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown, but also lesser-known guys like Rashad Bateman. On the defensive side, they've looked strong, particularly the linebacker duo of Bowser and Queen, while OA has a strong case for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But in order to hold down that title, they can't lose games like this that were easily winnable. The decision to go for 2 did make sense for a few reasons. They had all the momentum on that final drive. Let's say they tie it and send it to overtime, but they lose the coin toss and the Steelers score on the first possession. Do you really want to lose a game like that? Really, it boiled down to Harbaugh trusting his MVP more than his defense, which isn't a bad thing. They did the same against the Chiefs when they converted that last-minute fourth down to seal it instead of punting it back to Mahomes. But the worst thing about the conversion attempt was not the decision itself. It was the fact that nobody was blocking TJ Watt. As long as he saw daylight, there was no way he was going to let that pass reach the end zone. As everyone knows, only one team gets a first-round bye this year, and the Ravens, with their loss, just slipped down to the 3 seed. If they lose out on the number 1 seed because of a failed 2-point conversion, that'll sting for a long time. And their schedule isn't going to do them many favors as they face the Packers, Rams, and Steelers again during this home stretch. In an arms race at the top of the AFC, the Ravens couldn't afford to take a chance like that. And as a result, it could cost them dearly. Bill Belichick just proved he doesn't need a QB to win a game. Take a look at this wild Mac Jones stat. After the first half of the Bills game, he had a 116.7 passer rating and a .90 EPA per play rating. He also had 1 passing attempt for 12 yards. And those 12 yards were a total fluke. Not only does a game like this totally dismantle the use of wins as a QB stat, it may have been Belichick's most impressive coaching performance ever. 46 rushing attempts to 3 passing attempts is totally unheard of in this day and age. It would have been one thing if he had tried this against the Jacksonville Jaguars on a 1 o'clock game, but this is a high stakes game against a division rival in prime time in shitty weather. This one Patriots fan thought that the Bills would stack the box and make New England look one-dimensional while Mac Jones would have his rookie game. Well, all those things did happen, and the Patriots still won. The two main reasons the Patriots ran the ball all game long. Belichick saw this tweet before the game, and one of their first plays was a Damian Harris 60-yarder, so he thought, why deviate from it? And with the Bills' run defense looking very shaky as of late, they knew they wouldn't have any answers. And absolutely give credit to the Pats defense because they stood tall. Even though the Bills beat the Patriots 4-1 in red zone attempts, Buffalo's only score came on a short field as a result of a muffed punt. J.C. Jackson, who's very quickly establishing himself as an elite corner and challenging Trey White as the best in the division, was in Diggs' grill all game long. With the Bills failing to establish a run game of their own, they had to beat them through the air in extreme weather. Not an ideal situation. Allen, to his credit, still made some really nice throws, but the pass defenders managed to get there before his receivers could. Moving to 9-4 along with 7 straight wins heading into their bye week has to feel incredible. And while this game didn't exactly inspire a ton of confidence in Mac Jones as a playoff performer, we all know that under Belichick, they can win in a number of different ways. Everyone tried to act like the Brady versus Belichick debate was settled when Brady won a Super Bowl in his first season without him. But perhaps the best and only way it can be settled is if they square off against each other in a Super Bowl. If this season really ends with Bucs versus Pats in the Super Bowl, Lord have mercy.